GNT show is intended for mature audiences. Parental discussion is advice. Live long and prosper.
Shall we just start right off the bat with a Las Vegas update?
Are we still talking Vegas, right?
We are.
Talking about Vegas.
Yes. You're coming to Vegas, right? Star Trek Las Vegas may take place every August, but on this show...
This is where we hang out the rest of the year.
Exactly.
The crew has been fatigued now from so many months in space, and they need to take a break. The landing party has beamed down to check out the terrain while the crew gets ready to play. They say there's only plant life living on this lovely rock, but a rodent appears wearing a vest.
And Jolan True citizens, this is Gettysburg 7 coming to you from the floor of Star Trek Las Vegas 2015. Alongside me, co-host extraordinaire Terry Lynn.
Hello, everyone.
And we are very honored. Last year, remember how we geeked out when Mike Okuda sat down with us? Well, this year we have there's not enough word, Doug Drexler, ladies and gentlemen.
Welcome to the GNT.
Oh, hey there, everybody. It's nice to be here.
Well, for a lot of
Mike Okuda, I love him. He's my hero.
We love Mike Okuda, but we love your work too. And for a lot of our listeners who may not understand why I am so excited right now, explain to them your art, your contribution to the history of Star Trek, and how you became involved in the creation of the look of Star Trek.
Well, I've been a Star Trek fan since the very beginning. I watched the original series first run in black and white. I watched the entire first season in black and white.
That's awesome.
But, so I'm living the dream, I gotta say. That's it. What's going on here?
Kipley Brown from Star Trek Enterprise is giving us
saw you. Hi.
She enjoys doing things like this to me.
I didn't realize you guys had that. No, it's okay.
You remind me of, when I saw you on Continuous, you remind me of Katie Sackhoff.
I will start bucket up for anyone. Thank you.
I work on Continuous. I do the ship stuff.
I know you would.
And we're going to talk about that.
And we are going to talk about that. So, but you've been watching since you were young.
Yes, I was an original fan, and when it wasn't hip to do so. As a matter of fact, when I was I was 14, I guess, when the show was on first run, the original show. And science fiction was not hip at the time.
No.
You were ridiculed for it,
Yes.
It was kind of a little tiny club at the time.
Right.
And, the thing about Star Trek, well, of course, I was a very well-read kid. I read a lot of science fiction at that age. And when you watch Star Trek, you knew that the people behind it were science fiction fans.
Right.
As a kid, I've enjoyed Lost in Space and stuff like that, but they were always kind of goofy, Right. It never felt like real. I'm sorry, Erwin. I know you're not listening, Erwin, but it was always very tongue-in-cheek and kind of silly. And Star Trek took itself very seriously, and I took science fiction very seriously myself. So I was involved with the Save Star Trek campaigns in the 60s as a kid, and I ended up in newspapers for writing, letters and organizing, kids to write and help save the show. But now I could probably blather on forever about this.
We'd be okay with that.
Trust me. From that point, I don't know if you'd ever heard of the Federation Trading Post. I ran the Federation Trading Post in New York City.
Talked about in These Are the Voyages.
Yes, he does.
Yeah.
We had a store. It was we had the Federation Trading Post at 53rd and 3rd. It was a pretty exclusive neighborhood. I don't know how we did it. Where it was the first thing like it anywhere. On top of that, at that time, we also did the Star Trek poster books. Do you remember the poster books?
Yes, I do.
And those were a labor of love, too. And we became very involved with the conventions and things like that. But what happened to me was that I ended up falling in love with prosthetic makeup, character makeup, creatures, characters, stuff like that. And I ended up being friends with Dick Smith. Now, Dick Smith did The Exorcist, Little Big Man, Amadeus. He was probably the greatest character makeup artist who ever lived, and he gave almost everyone their start in the business. And it turned out he lived in Larchmont, which was just 15 miles north of where I lived in New York.
Oh, okay.
So I sent him. A friend of mine actually looked at some of my work and said, "You know, I just interviewed Dick Smith. I'm going to give you his telephone number. You should call him." And it took me about 2 weeks to build up the courage to call Dick Smith. I called him up, and he kept me on the phone for like an hour and a half, giving me information and where to get stuff. And I started sending him pictures of my work. And 3 months later, I went to work on a picture called The Hunger. It was a modern vampire story. It had David Bowie in it.
I remember
The
that.
Hunger.
I was a huge Bowie, well, still am, and that's why I went to see it, because he,
that was
Natasha Kinski was in that? Was that the one?
No, it had.
It had somebody.
Oh my God!
Somebody foreign like that, though.
I can't believe I remember. Adore. The Hunger had that French actress in it. What was it? Catherine Deneuve. Catherine Deneuve. Yeah. So that was my first job in the business, and it was a great one because we had like 5 stages of old age makeup. We had mummy suits. We had crumbling mummies,
How old
puppet
were you
heads.
at the time?
Well, I consider myself, I think compared to some people I know, I started late in the business.
Really?
I was about 24.
Wow. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I know people who are in their, 19 and 20 are getting into the business, you know. So I mean, looking back now, I guess it wasn't really that late, but at the time it seemed like it was. I ended up working and hitting it off with Dick Smith, and ended up working with him on a couple of films at Starman I was on with him, where we did probably one of the last big stop motion animation replacement, where Jeff Bridges grows into an adult from a little zygote.
Right.
We did that. Of course, now to do an effect like that in a computer is easy peasy, but back then we made 150 replacement animation heads full size.
Whoa.
That went from the little boy to Jeff Bridges, and it took us 6 months in Dick's basement to do that. So Dick hooked me up with a guy named John Caglione, who was a makeup artist.
Okay.
And we became partners, and we were partners for like 13 years, and we did a lot of pictures together. But we did them all out of New York. We were part of the New York makeup clique with Dick Smith.
Okay.
And we knew we were going to come out to LA sooner or later, but we wanted to go out on a job. We didn't want to come out looking for a job.
Oh, I see. Well, that makes sense.
And we had worked on the Cotton Club, where we met Milena Canonero, who is a wardrobe designer. Academy Award-winning wardrobe designer, and John Landau, who produced Avatar and Titanic and stuff. We met him on Manhunter and FX and stuff like that. And
Manhunter, the
Tom Noonan.
Silence of the Lambs.
Yeah, the first one by Michael Mann. I did Dollarhide's makeups. We ended up Milena and John Landau were hired by Warren Beatty to do Dick Tracy. And Warren isn't your average bear, and he interviewed a lot of the LA guys, makeup-wise, and John and Milena said, you really should talk to John and Doug. They thought that he'd like us. So we were out here on another job, and Warren invited us up to his house, and we talked, and he decided he wanted us to do Dick Tracy.
Wow.
So that was a big job.
No kidding.
And we won an Academy Award for it on top of that. But the thing was that this was about second season TNG, right?
Right.
I knew I wanted to be on Star Trek. Before TNG premiered, I was in New York, and I'm thinking, oh my God, I can't believe it. They're going to do Star Trek again with Gene Roddenberry and Bob Justman, and I'm not on it. And John says to me, you could call Bob Justman up. You're a professional. Just call him. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. I could do that. And I got on the phone. I called the Paramount switchboard, and I said, yes, in my most adult voice. I'd like to speak to Bob Justman at the Star Trek office. And she said, one moment. And the next thing I knew, I had Bob on the phone. That ended up being a long friendship with Bob. I didn't they had Mike Westmore had been hired to do the makeup. I hadn't met Mike before, but of course I knew who Mike was, and the Westmores practically invented Hollywood makeup.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, all of his family, you know, Perce Westmore, Bud Westmore. I mean, those guys, amazing history. If you've never read House of Westmore, the book about the Westmores, I highly recommend it. It's a real eye-opener.
Keeping that flame going.
Because I was on an episode of Face Off.
Yes, you were.
The judge, which was a lot of fun, although very, very difficult, because to judge people who are hanging on, whether they're going to win or not, it takes it out of you to have to criticize.
And they are talented.
Oh, there's some really great stuff. So, I ended up. I ended up.
I thought you wanted water.
Oh, yeah, I would like some water.
Yeah, there you go. So the Westmores.
So, I wrote I went out and I visited Bob before they even had built any sets at Paramount. I'll never forget it. Bob was wonderful, and he's the sweetest guy. And if you've ever read, like, The Making of Star Trek, Bob Justman's memos, how hilarious they are. And as a kid, I idolized Bob Justman. We used to, you know how some people will say, Jesus H. Christ, if they get, we used to say Jesus H. Justman when I was a kid, you know. But, so I went out, I visited Bob. Bob kept me with him all day long to meetings with ILM, and, you know, and I was sitting in his office, and he introduced me to Eddie Milkis, who was a producer on the original series and was on TNG, and he was part of Miller Milkis Boyette, who did Happy Days, and so Eddie Milkis was, I mean, I couldn't believe I was meeting Eddie Milkis. I practically dropped to my knees, you know, oh, Eddie Milkis. But the thing is, I'm sitting with Eddie and I'm sitting with Bob, and in the middle of us talking, the door bangs open and Roddenberry comes in.
Oh, man. Was he larger than life?
Oh, well, he always was, and I had seen Gene on and off, you know, since the early days of conventions. You know, I used to go to conventions when, you know, all the New Yorkers.
The first ones were in New York.
Oh, yeah, I was at the very first Star Trek convention. And it's like 1971 or something like that.
I think it.
Yeah, I was at the very first one. They only expected a few hundred people, and I think 1,000 showed up.
Yep.
So Gene comes in, and he says, I've got it. He says, Picard stops the ship, turns it around, and they surrender. And I'm like this. And Bob says, and Gene turns and looks at me, and Bob says, you know, Gene, I don't think you realize what you just did to this guy. I'll never forget that. Anyway, I had a great visit. Bob and I stayed friends for a long time. Dorothy got to know Bob really well as well. I came out for another visit while they were shooting Encounter at Farpoint. And got to see the sets and hung out for the day. And that's where I met Mike Westmore for the first time. Mike and I hit it off immediately. And as soon as we were done with Dick Tracy, I went over to Mike and I literally begged him to let me come work on Star Trek.
My mind is just blown by this, that he felt that he had to beg for a job. I'm just like,
well, you know, Mike was like, well, what do you want to do that for? You're doing features. You just finished Dick Tracy, which was like the biggest show in town at the time.
They were talking, I think
it was the new pinnacle for makeup, let's face it.
Oh, yeah.
And Marina Sirtis was talking yesterday on their panel about how when they started, movie actors said TV, no.
Right, so there was an assumption that why would you want to?
All the major people are doing TV.
Right.
Hey, I think the best stuff is being done for television now.
Oh, agreed.
I think that TV, movies have really, there's good movies being done, but...
Is there too much CGI?
Oh, I don't think there could be too much CGI.
But something like The Avengers, which looks amazing, but it's all CGI.
I don't see a problem with that. I mean, honestly, first of all, I do CGI now. That's what I do.
Right.
And what you did on Continues is amazing. We'll talk about that.
Well, I mean, the way, and I'll get to how that happened to me, but basically, I told Mike, I said, there's no place on earth I want to be except right here, and he hired me on, and I was on TNG for 3 years doing makeup with Mike, and we had a blast. We had so much fun. The thing was that now I was living on board the Enterprise, because when you're a makeup artist, you're on set all the time.
Right.
And I was a sketcher. I drew, I designed, and stuff like that. And I was on those beautiful sets, which I loved them. They were so wonderful. And I met Mike Okuda one day. He was down at the craft service table. And I think I embarrassed him. I gushed like crazy over his work because the interfaces on the Enterprise were, look, I'm not bad-mouthing the new movies, but when I see the new movies and I see the bridge, I can't make head nor tails of those readouts. They don't. The thing that I loved about what Mike did with his LCARS interface was that it was believable. It looked like it did something. There was a logic to it. And in order to sell the ship and the fact that it's real, you need to believe that there's an organization behind the scenes that plans the computer systems and how everything works. And when I saw Mike's stuff, that was always the feeling I got. The instant I saw it, it was so organized. And there were hot spots. Yeah. It was like a lot of graphics you'll see, they just throw the kitchen sink in there and use every color on the planet.
Right.
Mike had areas on the readouts that looked like they were, low activity, high activity. He kept a very limited color palette, which worked real well, especially when you have a lot of different alien races. If you're using every color on Earth, where are you going to go when you do Romulans and you do Klingons? So Mike always kept the color palettes very limited for each. So when you looked at the interfaces, you knew what it was right away.
Right.
So I got to know Mike, and I remember, I'll never forget this. I was on stage, he came down, and I said, Mike, is there any chance of getting into the art department? And he looks around, and he grabs me and drags me down the hall of the Enterprise D, pulls open those big heavy doors to the hangar deck, the holodeck doors, drags them open. The shuttlecraft with the door that comes down in the back was sitting in the hangar. We went into that shuttle. He sat in the pilot seat. I sat in the co-pilot seat. And
2001 is this?
That's exactly right. It was just like 2001. And Mike and I laugh about it now, but it was like, it was like going in the pool, sitting in the pod. He wanted to take me in there because he didn't want anyone else to, because I'm a geeky fan, and I have to say that there was a period of time where you had to be careful about being too geeky because there are fans who broke into the sets, that stole uniforms and stuff like that. And so the producers were wary about anyone who was too geeky and working on a show. You might steal something, So he dragged me in there for privacy so that Hal couldn't hear us. So you got to try to picture this. When you're on the Enterprise, it's so enclosed that you really feel like you're on the ship. Now, I'm on the Enterprise. I'm in the shuttlecraft. When you look out the window, you see the hangar deck, and you're on Star Trek. And Mike and I talk back and forth there, and we've talked since then how much like 2001 it was.
That's awesome.
Anyway, I almost got into the art department on TNG. One of Mike's scenic artists was leaving the show. And he says, I could bring you in. And at the last minute, she got cold feet, decided to stay, and I didn't get the job.
Oh.
But when Deep Space Nine happened...
She's Lucy.
So when Deep
Space Nine happened, this was my opportunity. Mike went to Herman Zimmerman, and Herman was like, a makeup artist? And Mike said... This guy, I have a lot of faith in him. I think he could do the job. I'd never touched a computer. At that point, not a lot of people were using them yet. And I think in the art department, they had maybe one computer. So Herman agreed. I went out, I bought a computer that week, and I had 2 weeks before I started and learned the program, like Adobe Illustrator and Photoshop and stuff like that. I crammed on those programs. Went to the art department. Of course, Mike, Okuda, and Denise, and we're like family now. I mean, and we were kindred spirits immediately as soon as we met. I mean, the one thing about Star Trek is that you can meet people like I'm just meeting you.
Right.
And we have a common ground right away.
Exactly.
And we've never met before.
Right.
So it was that way with Mike and Denise. And then Star Trek was a big family anyway. I mean, it was one of the best working experiences I've ever had. And I worked as scenic artist, Mike's right-hand guy, on Deep Space Nine for all 7 years. And when you work in the art department, one of the things that they had on Star Trek was visual effects and the art department had a great symbiotic relationship. I've worked on shows since then where the art department doesn't want the visual effects department to have any ideas, or I mean, yeah, we're designing the show, not you. Who do you think you are? That happens a lot. You'll get art directors who have an ego problem. They want to be the creator of everything. Herman was never like that. So visual effects and the art and the Star Trek art department, we got along very collaborative. They needed help. They needed designs. You know, Gary Hutzel would come into the art department and say, I need a Klingon space station, but I don't have any more budget. And we'd go in the junk room, we'd save model parts, and we'd build one.
As Klingons should be, clean out of junk.
Yeah.
Shut up.
Oh, the Romulan you. So, I got, so, you know, because...
So, are you the designer of Terok Nor?
I designed all the interfaces on Terok Nor. The overall design of the ship was really Herman, Rick Sternbach, and Ricardo Delgado was involved, and we all put in our 2 cents. But I'm not the designer of DS9, but because I was working for Mike, and that meant interfaces, alien languages. I designed every panel in Ops.
I love the Cardassian
look.
Just
everything about it.
What is that term? I don't know. Not the atmosphere, but just that whole Cardassian style.
Oh yeah, and there was, you know, I mean, Herman came up with traits. You know, Cardassians like things in freeze, you know, stuff like that. Certain
and the curves, everything had the curves.
Yeah, you know, it's a funny thing. I remember we took Bob Justman on a tour of DS9. He came for a visit. I hadn't seen him since I visited him on TNG. And I didn't know whether he'd remember me. He came over to see the piece of the bridge that we made for Relics. And Bob came down. We met him on stage. He didn't really look at me, and I figured he didn't remember me. And so we followed him onto the bridge. We're walking towards the TOS bridge that we built. And Bob turns around to me and he says, saw you win your Academy Award. He says, really proud of you. And then he turns and he goes, you thought I forgot you, huh? So, okay, where was I? DS9. So I worked for Mike and I got to do interface. Of course, one of the high points for me was when we brought the Defiant on to DS9 because I love the Starfleet interface that Mike came up with. And I designed every panel on the Defiant bridge. And the thing is that when we lay stuff out on those shows, every panel was thought about. Every panel had a purpose. If you went to the, weapons panel, it was all geared to that. If you went to, the con and ops combo, if you read it, it was all related to those functions of the ship. That to me, you go on some science fiction shows and you look at the consoles, and although Galactica was very good, it tended to just be a lot of spaghetti, but not on Star Trek. It was always, if you look at the tech manuals, you'll see how much thought goes into it.
I have a question for you about that. I have heard, I've been in the Army for 28 years, so I see a lot of things that now look like what was coming in Star Trek then, but that the Department of Defense in the 60s, the layout of the bridge, they were like...
They inspected it.
Explain this to us because it's so functional.
Well, Herman Zimmerman, when I was on DS9, was brought in to design a command center, a situation center for the Army.
I believe it.
Yeah.
And who knew that something that was meant to be a theatrical set of ease for camera actually ends up being so functional for a situational center like that?
Well, the thing was that Gene Roddenberry always took all of that very seriously, and he wanted everything to be logical and feel like and functional. It wasn't just, you watch some science fiction shows and it's just flashy lights, Star Trek was the opposite of that, and it really comes from Gene, who was a pilot. Yeah. He was a B-17 pilot during World War II. Matt Jeffries was a chief engineer on a B-17. They're both B-17 guys during the war.
Right.
So there's a lot of that real engineering reality in the show.
Is that part of the enduring, aside from the stories, is that feel of realism?
Yeah.
Do you think that's part of the
Absolutely.
enduring fan appeal?
Yeah, there's no doubt about it.
Well, I want to talk a little bit too, if we can, about how you got involved working with Pocket, doing some of the images for the books, correct?
Well, I mean, it was because of Mike and Denise. When they did, I started helping them on the Star Trek chronology, cleaning up pictures and stuff in Photoshop. And then when they did the Star Trek Encyclopedia, I did just about all the illustrations in it, including when they did the color version.
Wow.
So that's how I ended up. We had Margaret Clark at Pocket Books,
Yes.
who's a big Star Trek geek,
Yep.
and we got along great with her. And because of that, I ended up doing a lot of book covers.
Right.
As a matter of fact, I just finished a new one last week. And I really enjoy doing them. You know, often I see book covers.
I think so. You did Vanguard, right?
Yeah.
That's our favorite.
Oh, yeah?
Dayton Ward.
Oh,
we have a segment on our show called
Yeah, he's
Ask
great.
Dayton,
Yeah.
where fans will
He's a
write
great
in
guy.
and ask him questions. But not
Is Dayton going to hear this?
Yes,
he is.
You're such a great guy, Dayton. I love you.
Oh, for God's sake, his ego. Kevin, you're the brains, Kevin.
Oh, Kevin.
And David Mack.
You too, and David. Yeah.
I got back into Star Trek because of David Mack.
No, those guys have done a wonderful job, especially in the face of everything that's happened with Star Trek since then. I mean, I'm going to be honest here. I feel like we've lost Star Trek. I'm not a big fan of the new movies. They're fine action movies.
Yep.
But I don't feel like they're Star Trek anymore. You know, I mean,
There's Star Wars and Star Trek
yes,
clothing.
exactly right. I've read interviews with J.J. Abrams where he says, what I didn't like about Star Trek the way it was that I didn't like it when it got all philosophical and stuff.
Right.
And I'm like, oh my God, that's what I used to love about it.
Well, and we said we're very jealous of the Star Wars fans because that's his true love.
Yeah.
And it's going to be amazing.
I'm sure he'll probably do a good job, but I'm not happy about what's happened with the show, and maybe it'll return to be what it was. But you know what? You need to get somebody in charge who, listen, Rick Berman took a lot of crap over the years, but I know a lot of people are missing him right about now.
That's true too.
You know,
we've talked on the show, and when the show started 4 years ago, I was very vocal on the show about both Rick Berman and Brennan Braga.
And I have to say, we've done a 180. We really have.
In the last 2 years,
a lot of people have.
I like my heart now. I have such a soft spot for them.
I get it now. I really get it now. And it's because of not just Brennan, Braga and Berman and you, but it's also people like you that help keep the images alive. And I think a lot of it too. You have to understand most of our readers or most of our listeners are readers of the books, so they're seeing your work on that front cover, and you're bringing back that Trek that they love so much.
Well, that's and I'm thrilled to do that. You know, I mean, in case you haven't guessed, I'm a huge geeky Star Trek fan. Always have been. You know, and I'm just I'm so lucky. You know, because I've lived the dream, honestly.
Yeah, but your talent got you there to be able to live the dream.
Well, thank you.
And we really do appreciate you. So
now, something we just interviewed Terry Erdman and Paula Block, and this is exactly how long have you two been married?
Well, we've been together how long now? 24 years. Yeah.
We have, as you can imagine, a fairly young audience. Terry's been with her husband for
28 years.
28 years. My parents are coming up on 50. I had 2 failed marriages. But you two, I see you, just like Paula and Terry, you see that.
And the Okudas.
Oh my God, yeah, the Okudas.
So we have to ask,
for our younger...
Did Star Trek help keep you together?
No.
Well, Michael and Denise were best man and matron of honor at our wedding in Vegas. Just the 4 of us.
Yeah.
All of us.
That's such a great story. I didn't know that.
Yeah,
you learned something new
2
on
years
GNT.
ago,
I know.
I proposed to my fiance on the Enterprise D mock-up that they had.
Oh.
I proposed to her on there. We did a group photo, and she didn't know it was coming. And I called her to the captain's chair because I'm the captain, and asked her to marry me.
So we think that one's going to We're thinking that one's going to be successful. We do want to thank both of you for coming.
I'm not done yet.
Oh, you're not. Let's go.
You know what?
We told you.
Tell us.
We tell
when
us.
you're done, you say I'm done.
Well, we are happy because we can go.
Well, I have to tell the whole story.
I want to hear the whole story.
I told you that when I was on DS9, we had a very close working relationship with visual effects.
Yes.
You know, Gary Hutzel, Dan Curry, Ronald B. Moore, you know, when they needed things, they could come to us, we would do them. If they had, when we did Trials and Tribulations and the Enterprise was on the stick, Gary would say, guys, come down, I got the ship split up, and we would help him, you know, like for instance, the Enterprise needed more weathering on it, so me and Mike got on ladders with pencils and added weathering lines and stuff like that. So, when DS9 was coming to an end, Voyager was fully staffed, and there was no way that I could go to Voyager. And so I knew that in the last year of DS9, Mike had a copy of Lightwave, which is a 3D program. It was in a box in his office, and it basically just sat there, and I would pick it up and look at it while we were chatting.
Please, may I have your attention, please? Kate LaGrew will be signing for the next 30 minutes at table 63. Kate LaGrew will be signing at table 63 for the next 30 minutes. Thank you.
We'll edit that out. So the 3D Lightwave.
So, you know, I remember there was one day I picked up the box. I said, hey, Mike, are you ever going to open this? He said, you know, I don't really want to climb the learning curve. And I said, would you mind if he said, oh, take it. Well, I dabbled in 3D before, and a lot of the programs at the time, very counterintuitive. Although if you get a box that says intuitive interface, you're doomed, right? It's a lot. So the thing about Lightwave is I opened it up, and all the buttons had English on them. You'd open other programs, and they would have these, like, you know, icons that, you know, like a ball with a hook in it. What the hell is a ball with a hook?
Right.
And Lightwave, it would say scale, stretch, and, you know. So I liked it immediately, and this is the program that they were using now that they were going to CG. But
interesting.
So I realized right there that if I learned this program, I could probably slide sideways like I did with the art department. I could slide sideways into visual effects. I knew Gary. I knew Foundation Imaging was doing CG towards the end of DS9 and Voyager, beginning of Voyager. And Ron Thornton, who ran Foundation, was an old friend of Dorothy. She worked with him at All Effects. He said, if I buckle down and learn this program, I could get into visual effects. So that's what I did. And as DS9 was wrapping up, I went to see Ron, and Ron hired me on the spot. And I was pretty much a beginner.
And?
So, I was at Foundation Imaging for 2 years, where I worked in that department for visual effects for Voyager, and we did other stuff too, like Roughnecks and things like that. So, in my second year, they decided they were going to do Enterprise. And the thing was that, although I loved working with Mike, I couldn't see myself being a scenic artist again, you know, because I was just getting into this CG thing.
Yeah.
And they were working on designing the NX, and John Eves was working on it.
Yes.
John probably did 30 or 40 designs for the NX.
Wow.
And they all were rejected.
Yeah.
They weren't bad either. John's great.
Yep. Oh, no,
So Mike said to Herman, why don't we get Doug back, have him bring the CG into the art department, and you could design the ship in here in CG, where not only could Herman, see, the thing about a sketch is this, and John, if you're listening, I mean this only in the nicest way, is that John can make anything look beautiful.
Yes.
The thing about CG is that CG doesn't lie. And I'm not saying that John's lying, but it's just that his drawings are so beautiful, he can make a cardboard box look wonderful. When you're building it in CG in the art department, Herman can come over and I could turn that thing and he could see it from any direction he wants. I could move the lights around. He could see it with raking light. He could see it evenly lit. And then I could render flybys of the ship, and he could take them over and show them to Rick Berman. And Rick could actually see the ship fly by, something they never were able to do before.
Right.
Now, the thing I remember was that Herman called me. He made me an offer I couldn't refuse. I mean, do you want to come back and design an Enterprise? I said, yeah, hell yeah. However, I can't just leave Foundation Imaging. I have to give them 2 weeks' notice. I can't just leave. So Herman said, all right, that's okay, Doug. He says, I'll just come to your house after work and we'll work on it. I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to be exhausted. I would work a full day at Foundation, come home, and Herman would be sitting on the front porch waiting for me. And then Herman would sit behind me at my desk at home, right? She saw it all.
And you shook your head a lot?
With Herman's wife.
There you go.
Sandy and I visited.
So at the end of the 2 weeks, I went back to Paramount, which was a homecoming for me. I got my old desk back. I'm sitting back with Mike and Denise, and it was just great. Herman, and it was good to be home. So I probably, it's got to be one of the earliest uses of CG in a television art department ever. And I started, John continued drawing. John continued, doing his regular drawings, but I was there, working in Lightwave and building stuff. To be perfectly frank, I did a few other designs. I did the first Vulcan ship with the ring.
Love that ship.
I did.
What was the inspiration for that? To be Vulcan?
Well, the one thing was that what I wanted for the Vulcan ship, I wanted it to be something that came from Matt Jeffries. Because the Klingon ships were Matt Jeffries, even in the new shows. The Enterprise was Matt Jeffries, and I thought that to complete the triad, or that the Vulcan ship should be a Matt Jeffries inspiration. And Matt had done designs for a series that didn't go called, it was called Starship. It was, and it was a ring ship that had a long, right? And I said, I want to base it on that. And basically I did a Vulcan version of that ship. The Vulcans in the movies, the costumes had pointy hats and everything. Vulcans are pointy ears. I gave it a nice pointy shape with, I love that ship. A lot of people do like it. I designed
I fly it in Star Trek Online.
Oh, do you really?
I do.
I love that design. Some of the visual effects guys didn't like it, and they didn't use it after the first year.
Yeah, that's a shame.
But I've heard since then that it's very popular. Fans really like it because it's very distinctive. What?
I want to take a picture of you guys.
She wants to take a picture.
I don't know what the setting is.
They're so married. I love it.
Yes, we are.
We're taking a picture.
We're going to go. Thank you. I designed the Enterprise J, the future Enterprise.
He doesn't, I do.
Hey, some people, listen, I will find people who don't like any one of them.
Who designed the Sovereign?
That was John.
Johnny.
That is, to me, the sexiest ship ever.
I love the Sovereign too. However,
here we go.
Yeah,
John, I love you, and you know this. But the thing is that I find the D to be very distinctively different.
Yes.
I find the NX to be distinctively different.
Yes.
I find the J to be very distinctively different. The Sovereign is a stretched version of what we already have. You know what I mean?
I get you.
And I also think that there's a lot of gingerbread on it that is just designery. He's got stuff on there that's just for design. Whereas if you look at the NX or the D, almost everything on it is designed for a purpose. John, I'm not criticizing. I love you. You know how much I love you. But the thing is that a guy like Andy,
I love the ship.
I love it too. But Andy Probert is very detail driven.
Yes.
There's a purpose for every little thing on it.
Yep.
The NX, Mike and I talked that ship out over months. Every plate, every panel, everything on it serves a purpose.
And having been on my brother-in-law is a retired submariner. So having been in nuclear submarines, the feel of the inside of that ship as well.
is very organic to how the outside looks as well.
Yes, it was very, very I mean, the inside and the outside work really well. I mean, I think on TNG it does as well.
Agreed.
You know,
with that claustrophobic feeling for the NX class.
Yeah, you know, Herman went and inspected nuclear submarines.
I believe it.
Yeah, before designing started on Enterprise.
But even the outside of it is true to form of how the inside looks. Yeah. That's why I mean is that it just looks organic between the two. It doesn't look.
There's no disconnect.
Correct.
Between the outside and the inside.
Be? There's no space, like in Nemesis, the engine room, the long tunnel in Nemesis that they're fighting in at the end.
Yeah.
Where is that?
I don't know.
Where is that?
You know. So, although.
Do you have a favorite ship?
Well, I mean, the original.
Yeah.
The original, of course.
The Archer class.
You know.
Can't go wrong.
Of course, the NX and the J are very special to me.
Right.
I have a soft spot in my heart for the J, aside from the fact that I designed it, because it's supposed to be so far in the future. The challenge was that, they're not going to want to leave the saucer and the cells behind.
Right.
The studio will never go for that.
Right.
You cannot. Look, for the NX, we tried to sell the Daedalus class to the NX.
Oh, interesting.
Right. And the studio would not go for it. They wanted the saucer and the nacelles. So, and also because it was Enterprise, there had to be some connections between the NX and the J, and there are. The challenge was to keep those things and make it dramatically different, I mean, for instance, the struts on the engine struts are so impossibly thin on the J.
Yes.
That people look at it and go, those could never support the engines. Well, that's because it's a technology beyond your understanding, baby.
Thank you very much.
That's what I like about it.
Love it.
Ariel Roy just won.
Did she really cool?
See, now, did you hear that, you?
Yes.
Sorry, say that again. We were having a raffle.
The thing is that it's so far distant in the future, it still has to look like an Enterprise.
Right.
But you want to see... Cool with you. Got an Academy Award winner calling you. I just fist bumped an Academy Award winner. For instance, I made the nacelle struts impossibly thin.
Right.
And I get people constantly saying, those could never support the engines. And my answer is, when people watch the original series, that was one of their complaints. Those struts could never... You know what? First of all, there's no thrust coming from those.
Thank you.
But the other thing is that it's so far in the future, we are dealing with technology far beyond our current understanding.
Right.
If you are looking at it and understanding it, you haven't pushed it far enough. If people are looking at it and going, that's not possible, you're doing a good job.
That's right.
And that's what I tried to do with the J.
You got to give them something to aim for.
Yeah, exactly.
Which Star Trek has always done.
Exactly.
Which Star Trek has always done. So, on DS9, I remember I was working in Lightwave, and I turned around, and Gary Hutzel was standing behind me like this, rubbing his chin. And he goes, "You're working in Lightwave, huh?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And he says, "Now, how'd you like to build some ships for me?" Because he wasn't getting along with the CG houses. And he knew he liked me, and he knew he liked the art department. And the reason why he wasn't getting along with them was Gary Hutzel is a guy who shot physical models. He did motion control. He got the ship out of the warehouse and put it on a stand and lit it himself.
Right.
Set up the camera, set up the motion control passes.
He's Mr. Practical Effects.
He did it all himself. Now CG was coming in, and there were outside vendors like Foundation Imaging who were doing visual effects. And now he was just a guy who was going to the meetings and telling them what he wanted. And then when he got back the shots, very often it was not what he asked for, and that they thought they knew better. Gary used to call me up, really frustrated and upset, saying, "I asked for this, they gave me that, they're not listening to me, blah, blah, blah." Then he saw me working in CG, and he was like, "Hey." So I ended up making a couple of ships for him. We had a blast working together. And I remember saying to him, Gary, that was really fun. I sure hope we get a chance to do that again. And I remember Gary saying, be careful what you wish for. Well, while I was on Enterprise, Gary had gone off and really embraced CG and became a groundbreaker in using CG in television. And he landed Ron Moore's Battlestar Galactica. And I was still on Enterprise. I was still on Enterprise when Galactica started. And I watched it and I was blown away. And I said, wow. And, you know, I mean, he had taken something that was starting to get a little tired, meaning space shots.
Right.
And done something, handheld cameras, you know, whip pans. You know, the cameras like this.
And I heard that because he wanted the gun camera feel.
Yeah. Well, the thing was that he was reflecting the look of the photography inside the ship.
Yeah.
Steve McNutt, who was a DP, wanted to make it feel like you are there. So he would do shots like, plus the other thing is that on Star Trek, the camera was always what we called eye of God shots.
Right.
God knows where the ship's going to go. The camera would anticipate where the ship was going.
Right.
It would pan over and show you where the ship was going. It would start on the ship and then go over to where the ship, then the ship would go to it. The camera on Galactica didn't know what you were going to do. It would be shooting this, and then it would hear something, and then whip pan over here and see this, and then it would do this over here. So the camera on Star Trek, the camera was motivated by the story. The camera knew what the story was going to do next.
Right.
On Galactica, it was the opposite. The camera was motivated by things happening around it, and it was played as if there was some guy with a camera and he didn't know that was going to blow up. He's busy shooting this, and then what the hell is that? And then he would, you know. So,
more of a sports camera as opposed to...
It's like, you know, real life.
Trying to follow the ball.
Yeah. It's like if it was Star Trek, the camera would know where the ball was going to go.
Right.
And it would probably beat the ball to where it was going to go so you could see the ball. That's not the way Galactica was. So I saw that. I was blown away by it. And Gary called me and said, I'd love you to come. And I'm like, Gary, I'm on Enterprise. I would love, but I have a loyalty to them. I'm here. And it could go for another, you know, he told me probably in the third season, you know, it could go another 4 years. We thought it might go, you know. Anyway, when we got the word that Enterprise was canceled, and believe me, they didn't tell us. We found out on the internet. And about a month or so before it was canceled, we kind of suspected because people we never saw before were coming in the department with tape measures and measuring the walls and things. And I'm like, uh-oh. So when the show was canceled, I remember driving home thinking, well, that was a great run. I was on Star Trek for, you know, like 17 years.
It's amazing.
I go, it could be the end of the road for me. Maybe I'll never work again, you know. I get home, and there's a message on the answering machine from Gary Hudson. Doug, give me a call. I'm like, oh my God, he's going to ask me to come to Galactica. I call Gary up. Gary, how are you? Gary says, I just heard about Enterprise. I go, yeah. He says, but you know, Doug, he says, every cloud has a silver lining. And I'm like, oh my God, he's going to ask me to come to Galactica. And I literally went directly from Enterprise to Galactica. I spent the first year in Vancouver. And it was just remarkable because Ron Moore's Galactica is a descendant of more of Star Trek than anything else. Ron took everything he learned on Star Trek and things that he thought were shortcomings on Star Trek. Like, for instance, Galactica was very malleable, meaning on Star Trek there was a script.
Right.
And every page was written a certain way for a certain reason. And when I was a makeup artist, if an actor wanted to change one line, Rick Berman would come down from the office and they would talk about it. Galactica was the exact opposite. They'd let the actors run with it. When they were editing the show together, if Ron said, you know what, take Act 3 and put it where Act 2 is. And all of a sudden, it was a whole different dynamic.
Wow.
It was malleable. And they were able to, you know, a happy accident. You have a happy accident where it was something you never would have thought of when you were writing it, but now that you're cutting it together, that never happened on Star Trek.
Interesting.
Yeah. So I was on I've been with Gary ever since. I was on, starting with the second season, I was on Galactica, the Galactica movies that we did. They weren't in the movies, they were,
Right.
I have to tell you, Galactica came out when I was in Iraq in 2005. So I didn't get a chance to see. I went back to Iraq in 2007. And I got the DVDs. It was only the first 3 seasons.
Remember that.
Because the 4th season hadn't come out yet. The last thing I saw was that pull away after Starbuck comes back, and then it pulls away, and the music is driving. I watched that scene about 600 times because it was so... But since you were on the show, I'm going to say what I said to Tricia Helfer and Katie Sackhoff. Living where I was and going through what I was going through, thank you for the pain, angst, horror, and hell they went through, because it made my life seem better. And I mean that from the bottom of my heart.
Listen,
Galactica
for me to hear that
has a special, special place in my heart.
That really is wonderful to hear that.
So I was home on leave. And they had that documentary, remember the fake documentary on Sci-Fi? And they said starting next week, the final season of Battlestar Galactica. So I set the DVR. So when I came home in 6 months, 6 months.
You had it waiting for you.
I had it waiting for me. I got home. I had 72 days of leave. I'm watching Galactica. I hit it. It's not on the DVR.
Oh, no.
My ex-wife, her son had erased it so that he could tape wrestling that he was watching.
Oh, my God. What a disappointment.
Doug's wife's face is just
horrors.
It was awful.
My birthday that year, they got me the box, the big box set of all 4 seasons. And here's what's really interesting. On second viewing, the first 3 seasons, there was so much I had forgotten in that time frame because so much happens in that show.
Oh, my God. I mean, we would get like 15, 20 minutes into the show and say, holy crap, it felt like an hour.
Yeah.
There's so much packed into the shows.
And the other night we were at karaoke and I was dancing with Kate Vernon. I was dancing next to Ellen Tye.
Were you really?
So, Mike, along those lines at Galactica, though, when it becomes, how did that affect you as an artist to have a production team that was so much more malleable than the teams you were used to? Was that a big change for you?
It's actually much harder.
Yeah, I had to.
But the thing is that working with Gary and working with Ron Moore, and
Ron Moore is such a genius to me.
Because the one thing I really want our listeners, especially our young listeners, to understand,
Space Nine is my favorite.
Doug Drexler is a prime example of what you're going to be facing through your career, regardless of what you choose to do. And that is, you have to keep yourself relevant, and you have found a way to continue to learn, to continue to educate yourself, to continue to use new skills and not be afraid to learn new things.
Well, that's really important, especially in a world where things are changing so fast. And I'll tell you, there are a lot of my friends there are people who, and I get it on the internet a lot, there are people who they see CG and they're angry about it. There's an ego thing, there's a mortality thing going on. They're leaving behind everything I did and I'll get people who are actually angry for no real good reason. Just that they've been building model kits and stuff and they love models and now they're using computers and now I'm left out. There's a certain anger with some people. And then there's some people who, because of that animosity, won't pick it up. There are people who are physical model makers who would be naturals doing CG but won't do it because they're angry about it. And they're shooting themselves in the foot by doing that. Yeah. They're cutting off their nose to spite their face. And honestly, go back and look Look at Ghostbusters, all right? Look at the Devil Dog. I love that movie, but look at the Devil Dogs. They're sliding. They're not registering. They're not tracking into the shot. You know. That's great.
I just showed him the picture of Cookie Cupcakes as Caprica 6.
That's her name.
No, really.
Yeah, really.
But the thing is that you could go back and look at some of the physical stuff, and it's looking pretty dodgy.
Yeah.
You know?
Especially when he busts out of the building.
Yeah, exactly.
Still,
you know.
but you're right. Keep going.
Hey, you know, look, I could have gotten mad and said, "Goddamn computers! I'm never going to," you know. Don't be a fool, okay? When they stopped writing books with a quill pen, I mean, you could get mad and not use a printing press. Now you're left out in the cold. I mean,
great analogy.
You need to embrace those new tools and new brushes. I've never been aggravated or pissed off about any new development. I've always embraced it and had a ball with it. And that's, you know, and first of all, tell you the truth, I don't want to do the same thing for my entire life. I don't want to be a makeup artist for 40, 50 years. There's too many other cool things happening out there I want to be involved in. So, getting into CG, wonderful. I've had friends and makeup artists who resisted and hated it, didn't pick it up, and still won't touch it.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
They don't want to know anything about it. And they're angry at it. They're mad at it. I get people, I mean, it's funny. I remember I have somebody on the internet say they just saw, it was a sci-fi movie with flying piranhas.
Oh, or Sharknado?
It wasn't Sharknado. It was before that. Flying piranhas. Piranhas. They were eating people and flying.
Movies.
Well, the thing was that somebody on the internet says to me, "Thanks a lot." And I'm like, "What do you mean? I didn't make that movie." And they said, "Yeah, but it's CG. And how else do you make a flying piranha attack somebody?" And I said, "With a typewriter?"
Thank you. Very well said.
Now,
Very well
your
said.
lovely wife is giving us the watch. I just
yeah, we got to get more because we're going back.
Two really quick questions. Describe the feeling when your name was called for the Academy Award.
You know, it really is.
And where do you have your statue?
You know, it's a funny thing. First of all, it's surrealistic when you call. We thought we were going to get it. Anyway. But when they call you, it's like reality all of a sudden goes like this. Down like you're looking through a toilet paper tube.
Wow.
You don't see anything anymore. Everything becomes blurry. And it's just this one little circle. I mean, I don't know. When we went up, we were perfectly calm. I watch myself now and, but the truth is there's so much light. There's probably nobody out there anyway, But it's a big thrill. But let me say this, okay? Designing an enterprise is right up there with the Academy Award.
Wow, that's neat.
It really is. Now, for years, I kept my Academy Award in a sock, in my sock drawer, because I felt like it was egotistical to put an award out. It seemed like sheer ego, so I kept it tucked away. And Dorothy, whenever we would have visitors, she'd say, "Can I take out the Academy Award?" And I'd say, "Okay, all right." And she'd put it out so guests could see it. Then she said to me, "The day you win an Emmy, I'm having a cabinet made and everything's going in there." And I said, "Okay." And so we got Emmys for VSG.
Right.
She had a case made for it. Now they're all in a nice case.
Thank
with glass.
you. Never be afraid to
Now,
show
my
your
other
medal.
question is, you kind of gave us a hint as to your age, and I'm not going to ask, what is your workout regimen? My God.
I'm telling you.
Look at you. Well,
She's a very lucky woman. Yeah.
Well, I'm 62. And I've always... It's always been an interest of mine. Diet, exercise, and I've always... I always felt like in order for me to be successful at what I wanted to do, I had to master myself. And part of mastering myself was mastering my body. And so I read a lot on diet. I read a lot on exercise, and it's always, you see, the thing is that when you work in a high-stress business, you need something to keep your brain straight. You could easily go cuckoo working on these shows where you're under tremendous pressure all the time. I go to the gym. I'm at the gym by 5 a.m. every morning. Wow. I get up at 4 a.m. It's just always been an important part of my life. When I go to the gym, it is a totally different mindset. When I'm in the gym, or when I'm right on the line as far as my diet goes, it keeps my brain working better because I'm in control. When I'm in the gym, I can't think about the fact that I screwed up yesterday at work. I can't think about anything else. So it totally clears my mind. My mind is clear. I'm ready to go. But that's me. Right. Everybody is different. That's just the way it's been for me. Dorothy knows I've always, probably...
Has he always been so...
Yeah. Always have. So, but yeah, it's...
Well, I know that they have to go because you guys have got another thing coming up. And
well, the thing is, I should say that, after Galactica, we did Caprica.
Yep.
Which
my husband loved, by the way.
And we did Blood and Chrome.
Yes.
Which was all CG. We had no sets. They tore all the sets down. And every single set was CG. The whole show was done against a green screen. Right now, we're in the 3rd year of Defiance.
Congrats.
On Sci-Fi. Thank you. We're finishing up season 3. I think it's the best season we've ever had on Defiance.
Well, I'm hearing really amazing stuff.
It's really fun this year. It takes... Boy, I'll tell you, if you haven't seen this season, there's some really good stuff.
Really big stuff.
The characters, it takes a show a couple of years.
Yeah.
Back when we were on Star Trek, a season was 26 episodes.
Right.
Now seasons are only 13. So by the end of the 3rd season, we're really only a season and a half
in. Right.
And the show is hitting its stride. Yeah. And right now, we're in the middle of the finale. There's 400 visual effect shots for a single hour of television, which is very intense. And we're really under the gun. I didn't know I was going to be able to even make it to the convention. We flew in this morning so I could do that panel, and we're going back in about an hour.
Well, thank you so much.
Pleasure has been
thanks.
so extreme.
Well, listen, send me a link when you know.
The links will definitely be sent to you, Dr. Drexler. Thank you so much for joining us, and have a wonderful and safe journey home, both of you. And we're going to take a picture real quick. Until next time, you guys, Doug Drexler, say goodbye.
Goodbye, everybody. And
Bye, everybody.
Thanks for listening.
Live long and prosper.
Jolan True Citizens.
Music for the G&T show is provided by Warp 11, Andrew Allen, Drexler, and 5 Year Mission. This has been a Busy Little Beaver production.
Some dude walks out, proceeds to explain what it's all about. I sure want to leave. I think you'd agree, but we cannot leave till we find out what it's all about. It's all make-believe, nothing is permanent down here. It's just an amusement park. Bones is now alive, so it's okay for him to say, I'm a doctor, not a shish kebab. Apparently it's okay if we trust an unknown race. You can read any one of our thoughts. So be careful what you wish for in this land of dreams come true.